the Evolution Security Podcast. Welcome, everybody. This is another Gear and Mindset episode here on the Evolution Security Podcast. We are glad to be here. I'm glad to be hanging out virtually with my bro, Eric. We are the Tactical Twins. We are back together. Last episode, Eric couldn't make it. I think he had some serious military operation that pulled him away.
No,
but and this has been a busy couple of weeks, so I'm ready to chill out. And Eric, so I had that class here last Saturday. We had our Defensive Pistol 1 class, and man, it went off great. It was, the funny thing is though, here in Oklahoma, you have 2 seasons. Hot as heck summer and winter. And everything's been, basically 70s and some in the 80s. And then all of a sudden on Saturday, dude, it was 40 to 50 degrees and raining, right on the day of that class. But luckily we had a handful of, we had 3 of those, canopies you can put outside and keep us pretty much dry. And then, man, I thought about when I would go to 2 IDPA matches and, it was kind of sprinkling or something in the morning, and they would put just black trash bags over the targets as we were waiting to start the competition. But then I thought, man, I bet you I could go to the hardware store and get some clear trash bags and put those over the targets. We could see them and keep them from turning into cardboard mush, and man, I was pretty stoked about that because it worked perfect. I think maybe I had to replace the trash bags maybe once during the 8 hours, but I mean, it worked out great. So that,
man, great call on that, man. I'm sure that the clients appreciated that professional detail. And it's funny, I've shot IDPA matches before where they had those available, and I've been intending, I think I told you over the phone, I've been intending to purchase some of those just to have on hand for any of my classes here. And you certainly made me reinvigorate that thought. Man, I'll say this, man. I mean, you've been with me when we've hosted Craig Douglas of Shivworks, that is, for ECQC up in, of all places, Pacific Northwest. They're south of Seattle. I should have had those once or twice. One time we did have exactly what you're describing, bro. We had rain and we had those cardboard targets doing this number. Just
yeah. Oh, and that was another thing though that I did have to replace some slats a few times because I couldn't find thick enough slats, and so I just thought, okay, these will work well, but in the rain, they were just like a bow and arrow.
Oh, no, I got you. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Because I need to buy some new ones myself, but mine are, they're almost like 1-bys, 1x2s.
Yeah,
but
I think
I need some more.
I'm going to source those. So any of you instructors out there that know of a good place that, I don't know, at least a 1/4 inch thick. Those are pretty, I mean, you got a 1/4 inch by, 4 feet, works out, 2 inches, 1/4 inch and 4 feet, works perfect with some cardboard backers. But enough about that. But it was a lot of fun. We had 12 students and they worked really hard, and, it was a lot of fun. It's starting. My gig season is literally starting in 2 weeks, where I'm playing like twice, more than twice the gigs. And it always happens for the fall and the beginning of the year. So I'm not going to be able to really have any more, but I'm going to have one more class this year. But then starting in spring, I'm going to start rolling out quite a few for next year.
Yeah,
And so,
I'm absolutely going to ramp up the spring for certain. And then, of course, we're negotiating. A good friend of mine, Aaron, up in back to the Pacific Northwest, somewhere, right in the somewhere, goodness, in the Olympia area, is gonna host us for a purely combatives, no live firearms class. So I'm looking real forward to that. I think we've mentioned that on the air here.
bro, when
Yep.
I don't think you got my text about that the other day. When about is that? Do you know? Is it
So
just
we're talking about the middle of April, and
okay?
I need to text Aaron and say, hey brother, have you cleared the venue?
Yeah.
So of course that's certainly something I need to follow up with him on, because it's time to get it scheduled and start putting folks in that class. But Aaron, I just want to really say that, yeah, it sounds like your class went really well. I'm not surprised. And to my understanding, for a summary of it, your intent wasn't to go heavily through the class, which I'm cool with, but just for a summary, you provided a solid concealed carry platform, shooting platform. You taught managing unknown contacts, an abbreviated version of that, and even gave a primer for using pepper spray as well, to my understanding. It sounds to me, I had a conversation with a really good friend of ours, Greg, whom I'll just say out front, you and I likely wouldn't be doing this right here,
Mm-hmm.
or doing any of what we do in the firearms community, if it was not for Greg. So
That's true.
shout out to Greg out there. I know you listen, buddy, and you know he's been an excellent mentor of ours. So thank you, Greg. And he called me as I was doing a little show prep, and gave me some real encouraging, um, you know, I guess summary as well of what
Oh,
what
that's
he and
cool,
his kids experienced. Of course, Anna and Jonathan, his two kids, were students in the class. Both, you know, Greg is an excellent instructor himself. Superb shooter, range master qualified instructor, or certified, I should say. He absolutely knows how to teach his kids, but he said something that is just so, it's a truism. Sometimes your kids don't want to hear from their parents, you know.
hmm
And one of the things that he talked about is that Anna has not been real. Um, I don't know, for lack of a better term, she hasn't been real excited about carrying all the time, or that's not
hmm
been something that seems like she's keen on just yet. And also appendix carry,
hmm
and so one of the things that Anna said to Greg after the class is, he asked her, what's her thoughts on concealed carry now? And she says, I love it. She said, I want to carry all the time when I can.
Rock on,
And so yeah, that's awesome. And her boyfriend had some real nice comments as well. To my knowledge and to Greg's knowledge, he's never fired a pistol before, or even a firearm for that matter.
bro. He did really well, especially since Greg just showed him a handful of things so he wouldn't feel overwhelmed. He did a great job.
Well, that's just testament, though, to people that have never shot or had any other quote unquote, and I'm just going to use the quote unquote lessons from your grandfather or your dad, who, no disrespect, those folks may have just not had experience, but maybe thought they did. um but the reality is if you get into quality training with individuals that have a solid background and a solid, um, you know, instructorship in this realm, you're going to do way better if you simply go to a class. And I'm not saying you shouldn't go out and, you buy a new pistol, you've never shot it before. I'm not saying just put it up and get to a class. It's perfectly fine to go to a range if under, I would prefer you be under safe supervision at the beginning, but putting some rounds through your pistol to get familiar with it. But frankly, you might as well spend 500, 1,000 rounds in a class first,
Mm-hmm.
because you're bringing up the point that her boyfriend is a blank slate minus what Greg showed him, and of course, again, pointing out that Greg is completely competent in teaching people. And so I think that's the point. It's important for people to go out and get good training. But it sounds to me, from what you described and the really nice comments that Greg had about the success of the class and how much fun his kids had. And Jonathan's an accomplished shooter, 220 pounds of a powerful young power lifter kid,
Oh, he's a
wrestled,
beast, man.
jiu-jitsu, excellent shooter. He's an ECQC alum, took the class with my son, Nick. And, Greg and his wife, Angela, have definitely raised their kids solid. And it's no surprise to me that they're doing as well as they are. So,
Oh, bro, I definitely, Jonathan and we're some of the best shooters, if not the best shooters in the class.
not surprising at all.
Dude,
Not surprising at all.
the only thing that one of the things that, excuse me, one of the only things that I had to push Anna on was, dude, she was just punching these tight groups, and I would come over to her and say, "Hey, this isn't bullseye. We're wanting to shoot a little faster. I would like to see those groups loosen up a little bit."
Yep. Increase that speed a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So cool. Yeah, man. Excellent reports from the class, man. It sounds like it went well.
Oh yeah, a lot of fun. Uh, look forward to my next one here. I think it'll be here in about a month and a half.
Yeah,
Squaring that
I'm
away.
arranging the range for a course that I'm going to be doing here. Hopefully, I've just been having an issue trying to get it worked out with the range. If push comes to shove, I'm just going to do the combatives class with my instructor, Lee. He and I'll collaborate on that if it really comes down to it. But
Bro,
I go ahead.
speaking of, I would be remiss if I didn't thank again Matt Reyna and Krista Hoke from Training Ground. Their
Absolutely.
range is where we hosted the class, and they're just such gracious people. They're a huge blessing in my life, and if you guys are listening, thank you so much. Matt's my jiu-jitsu coach, and man, what a humble dude, and yet just full of wisdom and knowledge. So
Absolutely. I really like those two individuals, man. They of course hosted us for our pistol class and weapons integration combatives class last year in November.
mm-hmm.
And just such awesome individuals with excellent wisdom themselves as instructors. So we're honored to have them as friends and hosts. So
Yeah.
excellent. Well, Aaron, what do you think we get to some of these more serious subjects here?
Yeah, let's get into it.
So Aaron, I'm sure that you have a few comments about this, and I'm just going to open up with saying there's probably a lot of our listeners that have been hearing about the possibility of an ammo shortage. The price of ammo is climbing right now. We're seeing that, and I just want to be careful that this doesn't sound like the same trite that's out. That's the wrong word, because it's not trite, because this is serious. But there's a lot of people that have been talking about it. But I think it's worth us just hitting a little bit on it. it just to let folks know, ammo might very well could become scarce again, like we've seen, a few years back. But a few of the main points, and there's all kinds of causation factors. But that said, I think a few of the main items, and frankly, likely the biggest factor up front was the conflict in Ukraine.
Mhm.
We've been sending a lot of munitions of all types. And I will say this, when you're expending any kind of munitions, I don't care if it's artillery rounds, I don't care if it's missiles, I don't care what it is, there are some common raw materials in all of those,
Mhm.
right? So that's going to affect the cost of raw materials for basic ammo. You know, add to it that 5.56 is the most common round we use, at least in NATO, NATO nations, and likely a lot of what part of what we're sending overseas. But really, it's about the raw materials. You know, the a few of the factors are this Vista outdoor,
Mhm.
that sale it is kind of concerning. We don't know really what's going to happen with that, but it was bought out by Czechoslovak Group, and I think they changed the name. I don't have it right in
Hmm.
front of me right now. They're going to change the name to something else, but the fact that it's being bought by a foreign company is a little bit concerning. And we're talking Remington, various other, Alliant powder, a state cartridge. That's a
Man.
big impact, or could be. Um, we also have, of course, just recently, October 7th, we had Hamas attack Israel, which I should add to that. Actually, Iran attacking Israel through
Mhm.
a proxy. We got the upcoming election, and also a less heard of, and this was our buddy Brian Schilt, of course, still a part of EvoSec, kind of more silent on the podcast. Shout out to Brian out there, buddy. There was an explosion at Hornady in Grand Island.
Wow.
They were, I guess it happened in the primer. They were mixing the primer compound, and we know primer compound is an explosive, versus what gunpowder is, because gunpowder doesn't just burn on its own. That it has to have an explosion to set that off. And to my understanding, there was unfortunately a young woman lost her life
Oh
in that
man.
explosion. So, but anyway, without belaboring that too much, Aaron, I checked before we came on. Luckily, 9mm hasn't been impacted that much yet. I'm seeing an average of around um, 27.5 to 28.5 is an average
Bro, that's
sent per round.
that's okay. And I was going to say that's luckily that does not sound like it's really been impacted.
Yeah, but 5.56, man, 60.9 cents per round. So just to put that
Is
in a
that
little,
either is that 556 or 223? Because
so
I
so
usually
Aaron,
get 223 because it's just a little bit less expensive.
it is, Aaron. So I'm specifically talking about 5.56. And
Hmm.
now I should have priced 223, Aaron, but
Yeah, that's
but
all right.
it's going up in price for certain as well.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so 62 grain M855 green tip is running 62.5 cents per round. And kind of my go-to, man, is 193.55 grain. Let's face it, that's practice ammo, but it at least has decent terminal performance. If you were in hard times and had to use FMJ for defensive ammo, 193 performs pretty damn well. It at the speed that it's traveling, under 200 yards or so, it's still going to yaw and fragment and still have a decent terminal effect. So that's kind of what I base a lot of my practice ammo on is 193. But it's again averaging 60.9 cents. So to put that in, you know, folks can do the math, but that $609 for a freaking case of ammo.
Mm.
The last time I bought a few cases of 5.56, bro, it was down in the, 28 cent, 32 cent, somewhere in that
Wow.
range, man. So it's been a minute since I've bought it, but it wasn't that too long ago. But that was a decent damn price. But man, $609 or $610 for, full metal jacket, that's a no-go, man.
Well, it's also still hard to get, at least as far as I know. I haven't looked into it for a while because it was just a no go at the time. 3 years ago or so, when things really went crappy with ammo, it you could hardly get any reloading materials either.
Oh yeah, it's
Dude,
it's it's
isn't
hard
it
right now.
still? Yeah. So
It,
primers for one thing, and
crazy
powder.
primer. Yep, go ahead.
So I'm just saying, I have, so before the ammo craze of a few years ago, I I mean, I just thought, ammo would always be reasonable enough where I could go shoot a couple times a week and not feel the pain. But then it hit hard, and then it's like, okay, now I can really only afford to go shoot 2 times a month. And
That's what you
then
start feeling like at some point.
and so I was like, man, I sure wish I would have started a reloading setup, but I've still yet to do that. I've got my Dillon press picked out, and I'm ready to go on that. But it's just when there's no components. I don't want to talk about that too much because we didn't intend to.
No, bro, I think it's an important it's an important discussion. I mean, ultimately we're dealing with a lot of these factors, and before I go forward, because I want to circle back to your comments on reloading components. But another factor in this too that I didn't mention earlier is that this administration essentially told Lake City to stop selling to civilian markets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And in some way, they can, and there may be some validity to the fact that, hey, we need to build up our stocks here again for our military. I get that. But I also have to think that sometimes, man, if they can do their best to affect the civilian market in ammunition, they're going to do it.
Oh yeah.
So so I think there's probably a combination of things going on with that decision. But bottom line, back to your reloading components. Now, I was not prepared to talk about reloading components, but the last time I was trying to get primers when they were available, so they're probably higher right now. But I was seeing around $31, $35 per thousand when you still got to buy the other components. And I have a bunch of powder. Luckily, I had bought quite a bit of powder several years ago, and I'm good on powder. And I also got a bunch of bullets, but I'll probably run through that soon. But at that point, I'm like, it is cost prohibitive compared to current factory ammo prices. So I decided, man, I'm just going to buy. I picked up several cases of 9mm not too long ago. I'm going to get through those here pretty quick, but um, with the current prices on 9mm, man, I'm going to jump on and buy another 5K at least right now. But 5.56, man, has me concerned because we, number one, that's been a kick of mine recently. Our audience members that have been listening to us knows that I've been shooting a lot of carbine again. And at those prices, man, I don't know how much carbine shooting I'm going to do. Now, I will say this, I won't stop shooting carbine. I'll increase my dry fire, and I'll probably, focus on doing, 20, 40 round drills as, when I shoot pistol. I'll do a qualification or do a specific drill, maybe shoot the CQB warm up, in one session. But yeah, man, carbine right now, with those prices, I don't know how much I'm going to be shooting it like I have been.
Well,
Your
here's
thoughts on
my
that?
here's my dilemma. I have a pretty good store of self-defense 5.56.
Mm-hmm.
I need to look in my safe. I don't believe I have any practice 223
Boo.
5.56.
I'm going to
Oh yeah,
slap you
so
through the
so
camera.
I'm caught with my pants down again with this ammo stuff. But the reason why I haven't been shooting carbine that much at all either. I think, bro, the last time I shot, I bet you I have shot my SBR 2 times this year. So I mean, but I'm shooting pistol a couple times a week, for the last year probably. So
Well, and I am encouraged about, I still stand on this. Um, if you shoot pistol really well, you're going to shoot carbine well,
mhm.
probably good enough to be able to use it in self-defense, and frankly, continue to dry fire. I'm hoping this is short-lived, but I think in all honesty, man, at least on the 5.56 round, we may be looking at at some scarcity and some high freaking prices. So I think I'm still, man, it's tough to think about spending that much, but I'm gonna at least pick up another couple of cases. I've got around, and this is embarrassing for me. I've got about 1,500 rounds of practice ammo right now. But I've got a lot of defense ammo. I mean, I've got about 600 rounds of 77 grain, Black Hills that I got some time ago. I'm glad to have that because, hard times, man, that's gonna likely be my main round. And I also picked up, probably about 400 or so rounds of the Remington 77 grain match
Yeah,
grade
I've got
ammo.
some of that. That's some good stuff.
And I've got some other 64 grain soft point stuff that I've got that's decent as well. So I'm good on defensive ammo for now, but the main point is being able to train even during hard times.
Mhm.
And let's face it, you know we're not doom and gloom on this show, but the point is that for us to believe that we're always going to have good times, it's not being realistic,
Mhm.
So
Yeah, whether that's in our lifetime or our kids' lifetime or our grandkids.
yep.
Yeah, you that is a fallacy that I've definitely been guilty of. Hey, Eric. Yeah, we just got back on here because for some reason our podcast service, which is usually pretty awesome, sometimes it gets buggy and we just lost each other. So we're back on here.
I think, in all honesty, Aaron, it was probably because the subject, somebody didn't like it, so they
Yeah,
said
man.
they said, "Man, turn those dudes off."
These guys have too much influence and they're giving away our plans and we better shut them down.
I wish we had that much influence.
Hey, I'll say this, bro. Our YouTube channel's going a bit better.
Yeah, it has been, but man, it's still it's still like, such a minute percentage of our audio downloads. It's still aggravating sometimes. I think, in all honesty, it's just because, number one, it's a saturated market or saturated platform, and the other aspect is the majority of what we put on there are these long form interviews.
Mm-hmm. So, Eric, what I wanted to at least bring up is now I'm pretty sure I wasn't prepped necessarily to talk about this with an article, but one of the other issues with this supply is, now I don't know how much it has affected the market, but I can see, hey, I'm all about capitalism, but apparently, again, back to Vista Outdoors, Vista Outdoor, they own Remington. They own the Remington bare minimum. I don't know if they own the Remington firearms side, but they definitely own the Remington ammunition.
Yep. Yep.
And it was maybe a year and a half ago, I believe, that they were excited about acquiring the Remington ammunition business and ramp that production back
Big
up.
time. They're part of the reason why we had a decent amount of supply and reduction in price. But yeah, go ahead.
So the rumor has it, and I'm just speaking off the cuff on this basically, but rumor has it that they built up a stockpile of ammo and basically are holding it off, almost like OPEC does, reducing their supply to up prices. And then, bro, they're talking about laying off employees and shutting
down lines. Yeah.
How does that make any sense within the greatest expansion of the firearms market and firearms owners in the history of this country?
Yep.
Unless they're trying to pull some cartel BS.
Yeah. And what we want to make sure that we're careful about, this is alleged. We don't know this for certain. But here's the point. If any audience member out there has any solid information on this, or even anybody from Vista or Remington that wants to refute this, we'd be glad to talk about it. You guys can, anyone can email us at crew@evosec.org. And, if we want to discuss this further, but this has been hitting several sources that it at least sounds like it should be looked into. Man, I would hope that a company wouldn't be doing that. But like you said, Aaron, I mean, we've had the greatest expansion in firearms ownership that we've seen maybe in the history, like you said, of firearms, or at least in recent history.
Mm-hmm.
Millions and millions of new firearms owners, bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Bro, so before we go on further into our next topic, I did want to mention our sponsor, Tenacor. They just released their Zero heavy belt. If anyone's familiar with that Zero belt, again, Eric, that is the best concealed carry belt, bar none. But, it is fairly flexible. The normal Zero belt is fairly flexible, and that is 100% on purpose. Jeff doesn't do anything without a lot of R&D and a lot of thought. There's a reason for everything that he puts out, every little aspect. But there are some guys and gals that wanted that to be thicker so they could carry a lot more gear, semi kind of duty belt. But so they definitely just released that Zero heavy belt. And Eric, I believe our friend Craig Douglas was involved in the R&D on that. And they just released it. They did kind of an email blast to subscribers of their email list, and everybody bought them up already. So they're already out of stock.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I look forward to being able to get one myself, but everybody go ahead and go out to tenacor.com and check out everything they have, and just look out for that Zero heavy belt to be back in stock, so you can get one if you've been holding out because the normal Zero was a little bit too flexible for you.
Yeah, good plug to one of our supporters, man, Jeff and his crew, man, producing the best stuff out there. And
there's
folks,
some great companies too.
Absolutely, man.
I love what
Filster.
JM Kydex does. I love what Filster does. Just for my needs, Tenacor is it.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody out there goes with any of those, and I would say those three companies, at least from our experience,
Yep.
they're not going to go wrong. And I still love my JM Custom stuff, man. Um, well, Aaron, so we've kind of had some somber, subjects tonight, but hey, we're the intent was to kind of talk about ammo shortage and how it may connect you know, to, other issues in the future. And frankly, are we at, do we have a higher threat posture, right now? And I would say we likely at least do, or we should be concerned. And, with the attacks on Israel, and let's face a few facts here. Hamas would not have attacked Israel had it not been for Iran directing them to do so, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would also argue, Aaron, that I can't prove this, but this is just my thoughts on looking at the geopolitical sphere and what we see in other open source and maybe some other sources as well, is that um, that wouldn't have happened without at least China backing Iran in this,
Wow.
and possibly even Russia. I mean, think about it, Aaron. What better way to distract the United States from either the conflict in Ukraine, and a possible conflict in Taiwan? Pull us into supporting Israel, right? So, couple that with the fact that of all things, Israel was about to sign agreements with Saudi Arabia, right? Can you imagine if Saudi Arabia and Israel at least agreed to be, at least, for the most part, work together,
Yeah.
you know, so Iran is feeling that threat, and being possibly isolated from, Saudi Arabia, obviously the most, they and the UAE. But man, Saudi Arabia is the most influential Arab country, to my understanding, in the Middle East. So, Saudi Arabia and Israel teaming up, at least to some degree, man, was a huge threat to Iran. So I think that's ultimately what was going on. But at the same time, Russia wants us out of Ukraine support, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then China definitely doesn't want us, you know, being as much, excuse me, as capable of dealing with a possible conflict in Taiwan. So, a major conflict within the Middle East, man, is in the interest of China and Russia, frankly. So, again, I don't have proof of that. That's just speculation for the most part. But, to be honest with you, I'm not, this isn't just me thinking this. I'm hearing some awesome thinkers out there talk about this, which, um, one of them being Victor Davis Hanson, frankly.
I was
So,
literally about to say his name.
yep. So, Aaron, one of the things I kind of want to talk about is, with this conflict, is there a possible increase in the possibilities of terrorist attacks here in the United States? And I would pose the possibility that if we really get thoroughly involved in this conflict with Israel and Hamas, or Iran for that matter, that they absolutely, we could absolutely see terrorist attacks here in the United States. And let's be frank, this border, is so porous. And I'll start with this because I'm gonna read an excerpt from Jack Carr's book here in just a second that I think is salient to this discussion. But Aaron, here's some interesting facts, and I pulled this from Fox News. Folks can say what they say about want to say about Fox News, but this stuff's coming from the from essentially from the Customs and Border Patrol numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, fiscal year 19, three terror watch list encounters at the southwest border or northern border. Okay, is what this is counting. So only three, right? FY 23, FY 21. What's important in 21? Change in this administration, right?
Mm-hmm.
From one administration to the next. Okay, so 16. So it jumped big time, 3 to 16. In 2022 was 98, massive increase. And in 2023, that is, there were 172. And I did the calculations, right? That is a 5,633% increase. And folks can look at the math on that themselves. That from 3 to 172, that's what if you want to put a percentage increase, that's what it was. So anyway, Aaron, I think those individuals were all on the terror watch list. So how many individuals have gotten through the border that we didn't catch? Right?
Yeah.
So another factor, Aaron, is that, I heard, our buddy Greg sent me a podcast, and it was Steve Bannon's show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a gentleman by the name of Steve, let's see, hold on a second. Pardon me. Brian Kennedy. I'm totally misspoke and misread my notes here, from the American Mind, which is a Claremont Institute entity. He wrote an article recently, and I pulled the article. I wasn't prepared to read from that article. I might put it in the show notes, but it's something I want to look further into. But he was talking about some of the numbers, and he said some interesting facts. Aaron, there's been 100,000 military aged Chinese men, right? So we're not just talking about on the possible Islamic terror side. 100,000 military aged men from China, right?
Okay, so let's say that again. You said 100,000 Chinese military age
aged.
men
Yep.
across the southern border.
Yep, southern or northern border.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Wow.
So are all those individuals, are they, do they have nefarious intent? I'm not saying that, but I will tell you this: it's well documented China has massive intelligence apparatuses in the United States. They absolutely are fully infiltrated into our our society and whatnot. So I would guess that a good percentage of those individuals crossing the border could be, you know, possible guerrilla army for the Chinese at some point. Who knows? People can say what they will about that comment, but I'm just laying it out. We also have had, so over the time that the border has been so porous under the current administration, we've had on the low end 5.1 million illegal immigrants, right? So that is massive, right? How many of those individuals could be either terrorist or other nefarious actors, from some of the first world nations that we're talking about, I mean, it's a big deal. Before I go further, so talking about those numbers, there's at a minimum around 3 to 4 million Muslims, to include from Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan in recent years as well. So, how many of those, we were talking about this at some point, how many of those individuals that have come from those countries were properly vetted? We don't know, especially that after our debacle in leaving Afghanistan.
Yeah.
a ton of people that could have come through our porous immigration system, even those that came over with our permission. We don't know. So a lot of that factors in, but I wanted to draw a little bit of an important point. And I don't know if a lot of our, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know this, but I don't really think that the overall United States citizenry knows that Iran was absolutely complicit in 9/11.
Hmm.
It may have been Al Qaeda that was ultimately, on the mission, but Iran absolutely had every bit to do with supporting this. So, to tie some of this together, what we've been seeing around the world, especially with the attacks in Israel from Hamas, which as we spoke just a little bit earlier, is backed by Iran. So, I just kind of wanted to remind our audience and frankly, this is something that a lot of folks in the United States possibly do not know. And this is coming from Jack Carr's book, The Devil's Hand, in some of his notes, because this book itself was about looking at how the enemy learned about our operations and how we would react to certain things. I won't get too far into it, but excellent book. But the point is that he placed some notes in the back of this that were quite interesting. And one of those is the fact that Iran is complicit in 9/11. The Al Qaeda attacks of 9/11. And so going to the book, yeah, hold on a second. Let me get my light here. All right. So one of the most damning pieces of evidence on Iran's complicity in 9/11 comes from a classified Iranian document dated May 2001, a transcript of which can be found in the Ronan Bergman's The Secret War with Iran. So again, this is recovered intelligence from Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran, the intelligence apparatus of the supreme leader, top secret, dated May 14th, 2001, by head of the intelligence apparatus of the supreme leader to the head of the operations unit number 41, which is the Iranian intelligence ministry. And this is regarding orders regarding the decision of the honorable leader Khomeini. Dear Yabba Dabba Doo Mustafa, God, sorry, I hope that doesn't offend people. A little shout out to Mark Levin when looking at some of these names of these terrorists. It's hard to pronounce, but he's known as Mustafa, which is the director of General Operations Unit number 43. We wish your dedicated and courageous team every success. The results described in your recent reports have been examined, along with other opinions. After consideration, and in order to remove the existing lack of clarity regarding support for Al Qaeda's future plans, the Honorable Leader has emphasized that the battle against the global arrogance headed by the United States and Israel is an integral part of our Islamic government and constitutes its primary goal. Damaging their economic system, discrediting all other institutions of these two allied enemies of the Islamic government, which is Iran, as part of political confrontation with them and undermining the stability of their security are obligatory duties that must be carried out. The Honorable Khomeini stressed the need for each of you to be vigilant in his field of activity and asked you to be particularly attentive. He also stressed the need to be alert to the possible negative future consequences of the cooperation, and this is in his input, between Iran and Al Qaeda. The Honorable Khomeini said that this struggle must be stepped up by tightening the collaboration with other security and intelligence apparatuses in Iran and with supporters outside Iran, thereby hindering the enemy's steadily expanding activities. Khomeini further instructed that in carrying out your duties, you must operate under the direct supervision of the security division of the headquarters of the organization, the intelligence apparatus of the supreme leader. So I'll stop right there. I mean, that's plenty read there. Bottom line is that this is intelligence that shows that the government of Iran had direct supervision of the 9/11 attacks. So it's just quite interesting. You know, Iran has been complicit in every major terrorist attack against the United States. You know, when it really comes, not everyone, but the bulk of them. So, you know, and I don't think a lot of people in the United States know about that. Were you tracking that, Aaron?
I knew that it was possible, but man, it's just I don't want to go into conspiracy stuff, but it's sometimes just hard to know what is solid info and what's not. So, you know, but that sounds like some pretty solid info, and it completely makes sense, especially tying back to what has happened in Israel.
Well, and Aaron, I'm not even going to mention, you know, this is slightly different, but, and even in this book, you know, that I've been talking about here, that was written by Sarah Adams and Dave Boone, you know, in Benghazi, is how Al Qaeda was absolutely behind the attacks on the consulate and the CIA annex. So, you know, there's a lot of connection there. But another thing, Aaron, that I wanted to read from, and let me see if I can. I'll try to tie this together without reading a whole lot of stuff because some of it may not be as necessary. So I'll read from an article that was in Fox News here just recently. And it says, this is the title: Hamas attacks remind that sleeper cells are crossing the southern border. Experts warn. Quote, they are already here. So thousands of illegal aliens considered potential national security threats have been arrested at the border in the past 2 years, which we talked about earlier. And this piece was by Andrew Mark Miller, of course, Fox News. And I'm trying to find the date that may not be necessary. Oh, so it was October 11th, you know, of course, this year, 2023. So over 1,000 Israelis were killed by Hamas terrorists who stormed across the country's southern border over the weekend. And one immigration expert told Fox News Digital, it's a reminder that the U.S. southern border is vulnerable to terrorist crossings. Absolutely, Laura Rise, director of the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation, told Fox News Digital this week when asked if the Hamas attacks on Israel serves as a warning that the southern border with Mexico is not secure and is vulnerable to national security threats. Quote, particularly the 1.7 million known gotaways, those who evaded Border Patrol because they did not want to be fingerprinted because they're either known or suspected terrorists themselves, convicted aggravated felons, smuggling drugs, or some combination thereof. So when you combine the 1.7 million with the 7.4 million or Customs and Border Patrol, it says CBP has encountered, we have to assume that the sleeper cells of terrorists are here inside the U.S. and Congress needs to wake up and preempt. Reyes, who has over 26 years experience in the immigration and homeland security field and served as DHS acting deputy chief of staff, told Fox News Digital she is concerned about sleeper cells in the U.S. waking up. And already with Hamas, protests in the U.S. this week in New York City and elsewhere, that was a very public signal to say, yes, we're here. And if the U.S. acts to support Israel in the Middle East, then there will be a response here, she said. So another thing, Aaron, that I want to kind of, again, draw the conclusion that we've been kind of talking about. We're talking about ammo shortages. We're talking about all these other factors. Now, Aaron, one of the things that really, really, again, the barbarity of Hamas in these attacks on Israel, and thinking about these neighborhoods inside Israel that were close to the border, where Hamas terrorists went in and sweep through neighborhoods, killing innocent women, children, beheading children, any horrendous act you can think of the highest order they were committing in these neighborhoods. And something I think we may have talked on the air about this, but of course, Israel is not they don't have a Second Amendment like we have.
Not at
You
all.
know, they can only own pistols, to my understanding, and they can only have, I think it's up to 100 rounds now.
Yeah,
So they
they
can't.
got
Go
it
ahead.
increased because of this from 50 to 100.
Wow, thanks, government.
Yeah.
And I don't want to beat up on Israel too bad, because they are the only real democracy inside the Middle East, if I can use that word. They are parliamentary. Of course, that is a democratic institution, the Knesset, that is. But Aaron, my biggest, if I am going to have a criticism, that Hamas knew that those neighborhoods they weren't gonna face much armed resistance.
Yeah,
So
not at all.
they swept. Yeah. So I think the point behind that is, I don't think that that's likely to happen in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or here outside of Fort Bragg or Fort Liberty, whatever you want to call it these days. I still like to call it Fort Bragg. I don't think they're going to attack areas like that, like here, or where you're at, because
Yeah.
it's going to be well known that there's armed personnel. But New York City, places within inside Chicago, you know, LA, of course, Californians can be more armed than you might think, but they're not going to attack areas like where we live. They're going to attack places where it's known that firearms are not as readily or not owned as much by the citizenry. I just think it's important that those attacks were a good example of why it's one of the aspects of the Second Amendment. We know the primary reason is to maintain liberty in defense of tyranny, but also not just tyranny domestic, but also external. You know, from enemies overseas, whatnot. So, your thoughts on that, Aaron? I mean, that those attacks in those neighborhoods was very sobering.
Yes, it was, and to me, I don't want to go deep into this, but this is just kind of a ancillary example. This tragic couple of attacks in Maine last week. It's with the millions of people in this country. Of course, again, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole. All I'm saying is that out of the millions and millions of people that own firearms, own AR-15s, it really is, if it was an issue, right, there would be a ton. I mean, we would have mass murders like that all the time. It's again, you would be, but then follow my logic here. But at the same time, then when you have these millions and millions and millions of people in this country that could that could carry out a terrorist act, and especially people that we aren't tracking illegally coming through the borders from these terrorist supporting countries. Man, how is it that we haven't had way more terrorist attacks? It just Occam's razor, right? The scientific concept of essentially the simplest explanation, all things being equal, that things will happen, and something like, a terrorist attack here could happen. But man, why? I'm not asking for it. It sounds, but I'm just saying it's amazing that we have not had something until now. But man, in this day and age, it really seems like it unfortunately is around the corner. That
Yeah, I
some
mean,
let's just say a terrorist cell of 20, 50 people decides to take advantage of our firearms laws, right? That's just a fact. The freedom that we have here, some people can take advantage of that. Or if they came in with illegal guns, Eric, that's another thing when
yep.
it comes to the porous border. We have no idea how many illegal firearms from other countries have come through.
Oh, and they've been coming through. Absolutely.
So along with that, let's not even, blame it. I'm trying to be careful. What I'm saying is, let's even set aside our freedoms. It is not implausible that a small cell could decide that they're just going to overtake a neighborhood in some soft city, just like they
Absolutely.
did in Israel,
And
taking
I
advantage of
would
knowing that people wouldn't be armed in like you said, in less free states, and less, Oklahoma and where you are, there's huge firearm culture here. But those are my thoughts. I'm just amazed that it hadn't happened, and the fact that it hasn't happened, it seems like it's around the corner, unfortunately.
Well, and I think to that article I was reading, Aaron, and this is something that I've been observing these last couple of weeks, both in our colleges and, our higher institution of learning, if you even want to call it that, is the pro, and I'll just say it this way, it's not pro Palestinian, it's pro Hamas,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yes, some of them may be thinking, and I hate the fact that you have these Palestinian people that are dying innocently. That's of course tragic as well, but there's a lot of those citizens, Aaron. I'm just going to say flat out, they're also that we don't know their support. It's a very difficult subject, but I'm not saying that every single one of those civilians are innocent either, right? That's just flat
Mm-hmm.
out.
Yeah.
Now, do we want? I'm not at all supporting just blatantly killing civilians, nor is Israel trying to do that. But like Mark Levin said, unfortunately, civilian deaths is part of war. I mean, can you imagine if we were concerned about civilian deaths in Japan? Yeah, when we bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima, it's possible that the World War II would have been a lot different had we not done
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's horrible that sometimes has to happen in war. But I think we're in a day and age where, unfortunately, Aaron, we have lost a lot of U.S. soldiers, thousands, because we bend over backwards not to kill innocent civilians, right?
Oh yeah.
So there's something to be said that you know we have a society now that is shielded with understanding that unfortunately is part of war. Um, I didn't mean to get on that subject necessarily, but I'm just speaking off the cuff, man. So, Aaron, to that note, I found a report that I'm gonna try my best to have all this in show notes. but there was a study done by George Washington University, and it was titled Hezbollah's Operations and Networks in the United States, 2 Decades in Review. Now, I'm not intending to read all of this because even the summary is a little bit verbose, but this report aims to provide a comprehensive examination of Hezbollah's affiliated activity in America by examining all publicly known federal crimes cases from 1997 to 2020 in the United States with a concrete link to Hezbollah. The authors found evidence of 128 individuals that meet this criteria. The majority of cases involve small, centralized hubs of Hezbollah operatives who engaged in illegal activities in conjunction with wider criminal enterprises to create an array of networks across America. These relationships of convenience have resulted in Hezbollah operatives collaborating with financially motivated individuals, criminals, and other non-ideological actors in furtherance of broader operational mission. These arrangements, in turn, have allowed Hezbollah to profit financially and deepen its influence in the United States, even as many such cases display minimal direct connection links to the terrorist organization itself. So, I'm kind of going to skip around here a little bit, Aaron, but based on analysis of the cases, the authors identified two distinct categories of participation in Hezbollah affiliated activity in America. Individuals who provided financial support to Hezbollah, which was 190 individuals, and those who provided operational support, which was 19 individuals. So 87% of the individuals provided financial and material support to Hezbollah as money launderers, bundlers, fraudsters, and goods smugglers, with many raising funds from others to be provided to Hezbollah and directly providing funds to the group themselves. This finding supports existing assessments that Hezbollah's primary aspirations in the United States are to use it as financial support. However, Aaron, 13% of individuals in the database engaged in operational conduct in support of Hezbollah, including as human smugglers, on the freaking borders, weapons procurers, that's right here in the United States, pre-operational surveillance, and travelers who sought to join the group. Despite the prominence of Hezbollah's financing activities in the United States, elements within Hezbollah remain intent on developing the capacity and capability to plot attacks on U.S. soil. So I think that's probably all that's necessary. I will say that I was also watching a video, I believe it was by CBN, is not CNN, but CBN, that was talking about some specific cases of individuals that were completely associated with Unit 910, which is a Hezbollah supported entity from Iran, that's supported by Iran, of individuals arrested and prosecuted right here in the United States. Several examples of that. I think the point is that to drive home the point is that we absolutely have cells within the United States. And with this current threat posture changing, all this support, these riots, man, in the streets right now, of pro-Hamas protest, we got a lot of individuals, it looks like a powder keg to me. I just wanted to point out, that the possibility of various terrorist cells is a real thing in the United States, man. I think that kind of does it for that subject. The main point behind all this is we're not being doomsdayers. The point is some of this, any of these things or possibilities that could happen may never happen. The point is that people need to be vigilant. If you can be armed where you're at, you should be armed. And more importantly is, there's probably some places you don't need to be right now. You see any of these or have knowledge of these types of protests, it's probably a good reason to stay the hell away from them. And also, but back to that point, make sure your family has a decent amount of emergency stores, at least a couple of weeks worth of food and water, better yet a month, better yet more. But, it's just smart to be a little more mindful of your surroundings and the possibility that, anything could kick off.
Well, bare minimum, it's at least probable and definitely possible that something could happen here. Because, again, back to my Occam's razor comment, it's, if you think about it, and I know most people do, but that think about these issues, but it's simply incredible, as young as we are, but let's just say in the last 200 some odd years that we have not truly been invaded or attacked. So at some point there would have to be some sort of attack to our mainland. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we know that in World War II that Pearl Harbor was attacked. That's one example.
And I'm certainly speaking of the contiguous United States.
Oh, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure in case anybody wants to question it. I absolutely knew what you intended there, Aaron. But yes, you're right. There hasn't been a landing of craft coming on the beaches of North Carolina, for example, or New Jersey, New York, what have you, or Washington State. That's just not happened. You're right.
That's just another incredible thing from a low probability but possibility. Well,
I think my biggest concern, and I'll just lay this out there. In all honesty, man, my biggest concern, although there's all kinds of things that could take place, man, my biggest concern is EMPs, even though that's just one aspect. There's so many other things that could happen. But, I think it's important to note that it could be any number of things, and the basic preparations are all the same,
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
No, I agree.
Man, I think, man, we've yammered on long enough, man. I think we've hit some decent content. I hope we didn't lose some people with some of the very sobering topics. Hopefully folks still enjoyed it and got something out of it. Well, Aaron, excellent stuff tonight, man. It was great hanging out with you, man. I think we should go ahead and sign off.
That sounds good, brother. I'm going to go in, sit by the fire. It's already getting cold here in Oklahoma. Sit by the fire, watch a movie with my wife, and have some dinner. I haven't had dinner yet, so.
Yeah, neither have I. All right, brother. Have a good one, man. Love you, man. Have a good evening.
You too. Love you too. Bye.
Bye.